There's a moment in every person's life when everything falls apart. Not gradually, not slowly, but all at once. Imagine waking up to news that your business has collapsed, your children are gone, your body is ravaged with sickness, and the people who should comfort you, your closest friends, sit in silence, convinced you must have done something to deserve it. This is the story of Job. But it's not just his story. It's the story of every person who has ever asked the question that haunts us in our darkest hours. If God is real, why is this happening to me? Today, we're exploring what happens when faith is tested in unimaginable suffering, and what Job discovered in the wreckage. Before the pain, there was blessing. Job wasn't just a good man, he was the good man. Righteous, prosperous, respected. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, thousands of livestock, wealth that made him one of the greatest men in all the East. And more than that, he had integrity. He rejected evil. He loved God with a genuine heart. By every measure of success in his world, Job had arrived. He had what we all secretly want, proof that goodness is rewarded. But then, in a single day, everything changed. An ancient narrative tells us that messengers came to Job, one after another, each bringing worse news than the last. Raiders had stolen his livestock, fire had consumed his sheep and servants. His children, all 10 of them, had died when a storm destroyed the house where they were celebrating. And then Job himself was struck with sores covering his entire body, causing him unbearable pain. This isn't a mild struggle or a temporary setback. This is the kind of catastrophe that would shatter most of us. This is the kind of loss that makes us question everything we thought we knew about God, about justice, about meaning itself. And yet, in a detail that would echo through centuries, Job didn't curse God. He tore his clothes, he sat in ashes, he grieved, but he said, "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." This is where Job's real journey begins. What strikes us most about Job's story isn't that he suffered, it's that his suffering made no sense. And that's the cruelest part of pain, isn't it? We can endure hardship if we understand it. We can walk through struggle if we can see a purpose. But Job was righteous. He had done nothing to deserve what was happening to him. His friends certainly believed that. They came to comfort him, and for 7 days they sat with him in silence. But then they spoke, and their words became another kind of wound. "Job," they essentially said, "this must be your fault. You must have sinned. God is just. God is fair. Therefore, your suffering must be punishment." It's a logical argument. It's even, to some people, a comforting one, because it suggests the world operates on a system we can understand and control. If you sin, you suffer. If you're righteous, you prosper. But this equation couldn't account for Job's reality. He was righteous, and yet he suffered terribly. And so his friend's logic didn't comfort him, it condemned him. It suggested that if his suffering was punishment, then he must be a worse sinner than he'd ever imagined. This is where so many of us get stuck. We buy into the lie that suffering is always a sign of failure, that pain is always a consequence of sin or weakness or poor decisions. And when we experience suffering we don't deserve, we assume there must be something fundamentally wrong with us. We compound the physical agony with spiritual shame. But Job refused this lie. In the midst of his pain, he insisted on his integrity. He said, "I know my righteousness." He didn't curse God, and he didn't curse himself either. Instead, something remarkable happened. Job began to process his suffering by talking to God, not through his friends' interpretations, but directly. He questioned, he raged, he demanded answers. "Why is light given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in?" he cried. "Why do those who deserve punishment go free, while I, who have done nothing wrong, am broken?" His questions weren't pious. They were raw, they were honest, and they revealed something crucial. Job refused to live in a lie. He wouldn't pretend his suffering had a purpose he understood. He wouldn't fake acceptance. He would face his pain directly, even if that meant questioning God himself. Here's what the story of Job teaches us that we desperately need to hear. Suffering doesn't always have a visible purpose, but it can still carry meaning. We live in a world obsessed with explanations. We want to know the why behind everyone, especially pain. We create narratives to make sense of hardship. The suffering is teaching me something, it's making me stronger, it's preparing me for something better. And sometimes those narratives are true. Sometimes our pain does become the soil where growth takes root. But sometimes suffering is just suffering. It's senseless, it's cruel, it's undeserved. And one of the greatest lies we can tell ourselves is that we must understand its purpose to find meaning in it. Job never does discover why he suffered. God, when he finally speaks to Job in the latter part of the narrative, doesn't explain the suffering at all. He doesn't say, "I was testing your faith," or "This will make you stronger," or "Wait until you see how this works out for good." Instead, God essentially invites Job to expand his perspective, to recognize that the universe is far vaster and more complex than his pain, even his profound pain. What Job discovers, and what we must discover, is that faith doesn't require understanding. It requires something deeper: trust in a character, not in a system. Job's friends trusted a system, the system that says good people prosper and bad people suffer. When that system failed, their faith crumbled. But Job's faith wasn't built on a system, it was built on a person, on someone he had encountered, someone he knew to be just and good, even when circumstances screamed the opposite. This is the realization that transforms suffering from meaningless pain into something that carries weight and significance. Not because God caused it or planned it, or because it will turn out well, but because your response to it becomes a statement about what you truly believe. And then comes the moment that changes everything. After Job has questioned, after he's grieved, after he's been misunderstood by his friends, something shifts inside him. He doesn't get his answers. His children remain dead. His wealth remains lost. But Job says something that sounds like surrender, and yet it is the opposite. He says, "I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes, I, and not another." In the midst of loss so complete that he cannot see a reason for his pain, Job pivots. He turns his gaze from his circumstances to the character of the one he trusts. He acknowledges that there is a dimension of reality beyond what he can see, a redemption, a justice, a ultimate restoration that exists beyond the horizon of his understanding. He doesn't claim to understand it. He doesn't pretend his suffering was good. He simply declares his trust. This is not naive optimism. This is not toxic positivity. This is something far more powerful. It's the refusal to let pain have the final word about who God is. It's choosing to believe in goodness even when goodness isn't visible. And that choice, that act of faith in the absence of evidence, becomes the turning point. Not because it takes the pain away, but because it relocates the center of gravity in Job's life. His circumstances no longer define his reality. His faith does. Maybe you're in a wilderness season right now. Maybe you're experiencing loss that makes no sense, pain that feels undeserved, confusion that keeps you awake at night. You might be asking the same questions Job asked. You might be tired of people offering explanations that ring hollow. You might be angry at God, or doubtful, or both. Here's what I want you to know. Your pain is real. Your questions are valid. You don't have to pretend everything happens for a reason, but you also don't have to let your suffering be the final word about your life. Somewhere, beyond the veil of your circumstances, there is a redemption at work. Not because you understand it, but because it's true. Your job, like Job's, isn't to understand the wilderness. It's to remember who walks through it with you, and to choose, even now, even in the darkness, to believe that goodness is real, that justice ultimately prevails, and that your life matters. Not because your circumstances prove it, but because you refuse to let anything less than truth shape your faith. The story of Job doesn't end with his questions answered. It ends with his faith deepened. And that is the victory that awaits you.